You don't notice the exact moment the cold begins. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It's just that, in a perfectly ordinary breath, the air suddenly feels a little sharper. You breathe in, and your throat tightens with dryness. You breathe out, and the thin mist fades faster than usual. The skin on the back of your hand tightens, as if someone brushed it lightly with cold fingertips. The night before was still familiar. The sky was where it had always been. The ground lay quiet, resting under the dark. And yet, in a single night, everything has changed. The wind no longer glides. It scratches, softly drags on, then stops for a long while. The silence of the grasslands is no longer gentle. It's hollow, dry, and wide. You stand still for a moment, not out of fear, but because your body is learning how to listen. In our modern world, when the cold comes, you pull the blanket higher, turn on the heater, seal a room. But here in the distant space of the past, the cold has no borders. It passes through skin, through cloth, through even the most familiar habits. And it's in that moment, the moment you begin to feel cold before you understand why, that this story opens. If you enjoy historical stories told slowly and softly, stories that help you loosen your grip, slow down, and sleep more deeply each night, take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue these quiet journeys back to the world of our ancestors, where history isn't loud, just warm and deeply human. And now, as the cold has reached you, we can move more slowly, more deeply to meet the people who live alongside it. The cold doesn't make you panic. It makes you attentive. You notice your shoulders drawing in slightly without any command from your thoughts. Your feet seek firmer ground on the hardened earth. Your breathing shortens not from urgency but from conservation. Each inhale becomes more careful. Each exhale turns light and thin. The night opens up. The small scattered sounds disappear. There is only the wind arriving, leaving, and the long emptiness it leaves behind. You don't need to know the temperature. Numbers don't matter here. Your body already understands what it needs to understand. This cold isn't something to fight. It doesn't need to be defeated. It only needs to be recognized. You begin to adjust very slowly. Your hands draw closer. Your arms fold in toward your body. No one speaks. No explanation is required. This isn't a moment of story. This is a moment of pure sensation, where time slows enough for you to hear the rhythm of your own living. Somewhere in the darkness, not far away, other breaths exist. You don't need to see them, only to know they are there. This time the cold is no longer alone. It is shared. And as you begin to settle into that feeling, as your breathing finds its own rhythm in the night, you will meet the people who have lived with this cold for a very long time, beginning with a boy and his family who learned to survive, slowly and calmly through the harshest winters. After the cold has had time to settle into your body, the world in front of you no longer feels unfamiliar. Your eyes slowly adjust to the pale darkness, and in the distant low glow of the fire you begin to see people. Little Fox is there. He isn't standing apart, and he doesn't step forward in any noticeable way. He's simply a natural part of this evening, like the wind, like the fire, like the cold ground beneath your feet. Little Fox is still young. He's not old enough to remember the long winters that came before, but he's old enough to understand that this cold is not a surprise. He has lived alongside it since he was very small. He doesn't speak much. He doesn't need to. His body has already learned how to respond before thought ever has time to form. Little Fox's family sits very close together. No one is too far away. The distance between them is just enough to touch, just enough to share warmth. His father sits quietly, hands resting on his knees, breathing slow and deep. His mother gently adjusts the hide draped around his little sister's shoulders, her movements unhurried and familiar, as if repeated hundreds of times before. His sister leans into her mother without asking, without searching for another place to be. And there, closest to the fire, sits his grandmother. She doesn't need to move much. Simply by being still, she becomes the center of this space. No one here is trying to appear calm. Calm already exists, woven into the family itself. You begin to realize that in this world, safety doesn't come from controlling the cold. It comes from being together. Little Fox knows his place instinctively. He knows where to sit, who to lean against, and when to shift slightly to hold on to warmth. None of this needs to be taught with words. This family doesn't talk about winter. They don't discuss hardship. They simply live within it slowly and steadily. Here, community isn't a grand idea. It's just a small circle wide enough for everyone to see one another in the firelight. And within that circle, Little Fox never feels lost. Time moves in silence. No one looks up at the sky to count the days. No one needs to know how deep into winter they are. Everything is measured by breathing, by whether the fire is still strong or beginning to soften by someone gently turning to stay warm. The most important lesson Little Fox learns doesn't come from the words of adults, but from the way they remain still within the cold. You can feel that familiarity spreading into you as well. There's nothing more you need to understand, nothing you need to remember. Just being there is enough. As the fire grows smaller and Little Fox's family sinks deeper into quiet, you begin to notice the space around them, the hide walls of the shelter trembling lightly in the wind, the darkness curling along the edges, and the fragile warmth being carefully held inside a simple refuge, a teepee standing through the heart of a winter night. You no longer focus on individual faces, because now what holds everyone is the space itself. The teepee stands still in the night, not tall, not solid in the way modern structures are, yet enough to create a fragile boundary between warmth and cold, between the inside and the vast world beyond. Inside the shelter, the fire burns low, never flaring, never crackling loudly, holding only a soft orange glow, just enough to keep darkness from fully taking over. Layers of shadow overlap deep and gentle, rounding every edge, slowing every shape. You sense that the warmth doesn't spread quickly, but lingers close to the ground, close to the bodies gathered near one another, as if it too understands the need to conserve. Each time the fire stirs, light trembles faintly across the hide walls, forming steady rhythms of brightness and dimness, repeating again and again with nothing sudden. Outside the teepee, the world is far larger and far more empty. The wind crosses the grasslands without resistance, carrying a long, dry cold. It brushes the hide walls without breaking them, just enough to make the surface quiver, releasing a sound so small it feels like the night letting out a drawn-out breath. You can't see that open space, but you know it's there wide, cold and silent. That contrast is what sharpens the sense of the inside. Not because it is perfectly warm, but because it is different. Here, each breath is held a little longer. Every movement is measured, not by thought, but by the awareness of skin and muscle. You hear the faint ticking of small wood in the fire, the soft rustle of fabric as someone shifts and silences so long you can feel time itself slowing down. Night sounds are few, but they are enough to keep you from feeling alone. Wind in the distance, fire close by, human breathing in between. Together they form a steady background, never rising, never falling. In this space you don't need to expand your attention. Instead, you can draw it inward, smaller, closer. Fragile warmth is preserved through closeness, through bodies sitting near one another, through no one moving more than necessary. The teepee doesn't fight winter. It simply softens its reach enough for people to endure enough for sleep to arrive. You begin to understand that this shelter isn't meant to promise absolute safety, but to remind you that safety is always relative, sustained moment by moment through awareness and adaptation. As the fire continues to burn low and the darkness inside the teepee grows familiar, the boundary between your body and the surrounding space begins to fade. The teepee is no longer just a place to stay, but part of the night's rhythm-breathing, trembling, resting alongside everyone within it. And in that fragile calm, when everything has slowed enough and settled into an even flow, you begin to notice the one seated closest to the fire, the one who speaks very little, yet seems to listen constantly to wind and sky, as if the time is nearing for winter knowledge to be passed on, carried by the grandmother's low, quiet voice. When the fire has burned low enough and the space inside the teepee has grown so familiar that you no longer need to pay attention to it, the grandmother's presence becomes clearer, not through movement, but through stillness. Winter Song sits close to the fire, her back slightly curved, her hands resting quietly on her knees, as if she has been sitting in this very place for a long time. You don't see her staring into the fire for long, nor does she look straight outside. Her gaze often settles on very small spaces where the hide wall trembles softly as the wind passes, where a thin line of smoke searches for a way upward. She watches without urgency, without tension, only with the ease of a habit that has settled deep into her body. In Winter Song, you don't sense alertness or strain, but a long familiarity with winter, as if the wind and the cold have sat beside her many times before, quietly like old acquaintances. When her voice rises, it doesn't change the space suddenly. It is low, slow, and just loud enough for those nearby to hear. She doesn't tell long stories, and she doesn't explain why the wind blows this way, or why the cold arrived earlier than usual. What she says feels like small fragments of memory falling very gently. She speaks of the sky, of the smell of the air before snow comes, of how the wind changes rhythm at the end of the day. None of her words sound like conclusions. There is no direct advice, and yet you feel yourself being guided as if listening alone is enough. Winter knowledge here does not live in the words themselves, but in the pauses between them, in the silences where the wind is allowed to finish its part. You don't need to understand everything. Your body has already begun to remember in its own way, slowly without awareness. Little Fox sits near her, not looking directly at her, but always within listening distance. He doesn't ask questions, and he doesn't show curiosity. Winter Song's presence is enough for him to feel steady, as if simply knowing she is there means everything is still unfolding as it should. The rest of the family feels the same. No one waits for a specific answer. They let her voice blend into the sounds of the night, mixing with the distant wind and the small fire. You begin to realize that in this world, knowledge is not separated from the rhythm of living. It doesn't arrive at a special moment. It appears when everything has slowed enough, grown quiet enough to sink in without disturbance. When Winter Song falls silent, no one rushes to fill the space. The quiet that follows her words lingers just a little longer, long enough for you to feel the sense of being guided spreading through you. You no longer face winter alone. Someone has gone before you, has watched it, has lived alongside it, and now needs only to sit there so you can adjust your breathing to match. In that moment you begin to notice the shelter itself, the way air moves within it, the path the smoke takes as it rises, as if her words have gently opened a new way of seeing this simple refuge. And it is there in that softened awareness that you feel ready to move toward a deeper understanding of how the teepee itself is shaped to live alongside winter. When Winter Song's words fade fully into silence, your attention slowly shifts away from the people and settles almost without effort on the shelter that holds them all. The teepee stands there without display, without sharp lines, just a familiar form that has endured countless winters. You begin to sense it, not through sight, but through the way air moves around you. The teepee is built in 2 layers, an outer skin and an inner lining, with a narrow but vital space between them. That space is never still. It holds warmth, slows the cold, and allows temperature to change gradually, never abruptly. When strong winds pass outside, you don't feel a direct strike, only a gentle tremor, enough to remind you that winter is still present, but no longer too close. Everything in this structure exists to make change happen slowly, as if the shelter itself understands that the human body needs time to adapt. The air inside the teepee is not sealed shut. It moves softly and steadily, following pathways long familiar. Cooler air enters low near the ground, blending with warmth before slowly rising upward. The smoke hole above is not there to frame the sky, but to give the fire room to breathe. Thin smoke finds its way upward, carrying the scent of wood and old warmth, leaving the shelter at an unhurried pace. You don't hear sharp wind howling there, only an opening wide enough to keep the air from stagnating. The teepee does not hold on to everything. It keeps only what is needed. The rest is allowed to pass through. This exchange of air repeats minute by minute, hour by hour, without adjustment, without intervention. And, as your body remains within that space, it begins to tune itself to this rhythm, breathing deeper, slower, as if joining the steady breath of the shelter itself. You start to understand that the teepee does not resist winter with force, but with long-earned understanding. The 2 layers of hide are not meant to create total separation, but to gently reduce the strength of cold and wind. Air is not blocked but guided along the calmest possible path. The smoke hole is neither sealed nor opened too wide. Everything exists at just the right measure. It is this sense of just enough that makes the interior stable, free from sudden shifts that would keep the body alert. You don't have to think about architecture, but architecture is thinking on your behalf. It does the hardest work, keeping the surroundings steady enough for people to rest. And when you no longer need to monitor temperature, wind, or smoke, your mind begins to drift more slowly, no longer searching for new information, simply receiving the steady repetition of air entering and leaving. The longer you remain inside the teepee, the more it feels like a living being rather than an object. It breathes, it responds, it adjusts, not quickly, not slowly, but evenly. That steadiness spreads into your heartbeat, your breathing, even the remaining thoughts in your mind. There is nothing more to understand, nothing that needs to be remembered. Everything repeats the 2 layers of hide, the moving air, the smoke rising, the warmth staying behind. And within that gentle repetition, when the shelter has fully done its work, you begin to feel your body reaching for the next natural act of winter, eating a little, just enough to keep strength and warmth through the long cold. When the space inside the teepee has settled and warmth is being held at just the right level, the next rhythm of life unfolds naturally without needing to be announced. Food is brought out, not as an event, but as a familiar part of a winter evening. You don't smell anything rich or inviting the way you would in a modern kitchen. There is only a faint, dry, concentrated scent of meat, dried long ago, mixed with cooled fat and finely ground berries or seeds. Pemmican rests solidly in the hand, not warm, not soft, not appealing in the usual sense. Yet as you bring it closer, you feel its density, as if it carries enough strength inside to last through a long night. The preparation of the food is unhurried. No one rushes. Each portion is shared evenly, just enough, never too much, never too little, as though it had been decided long before this moment ever arrived. When you take a small bite, the first sensation isn't flavor. Its firmness, dry, compact, slightly heavy on the tongue. A mild saltiness, a gentle richness, nothing pronounced. There is no complexity, no surprise. You chew slowly, not to savor, but to let your body adjust. Each chew feels like a steady beat repeating without thought. The scent of pemmican doesn't spread. It stays close, very close, just enough to remind you that you are eating. The feeling isn't stimulating, it's reassuring. This food doesn't demand attention. It doesn't pull you out of stillness. Instead, it keeps you there, within the slow rhythm of the evening. You understand clearly that this is not a meal meant to be remembered, but one meant to quietly erase hunger. Everyone eats in silence. There are no stories woven in, no loud laughter. Only the soft sounds of slow chewing and steady breathing. Little Fox sits close to his family doing what he has always done. He doesn't ask why the food is like this. He doesn't compare it to anything else. To him, pemmican carries no special meaning. It is simply part of winter, like the wind or the snow. The adults are the same. They show no emotion while eating, no complaint, no pleasure. Eating here is a neutral act meant to keep the body warm and strong. You begin to notice how powerful this regularity is. It tells the body that everything is in order. When food arrives on time and in the right amount, the mind no longer needs to worry or anticipate. It can soften. It can slow. When the meal ends, no one stands up right away. The rhythm of the space remains unchanged. The feeling of fullness is light, just enough, not heavy, not distracting. You sense warmth spreading gradually from within, not intense but lasting. Pemmican doesn't excite, but it does something more important. It stabilizes. In that stability, you soon forget that you've eaten at all, the way you forget a breath that came naturally. And as silence settles back in after the meal, as the remaining pieces are gathered away with familiar motions, you feel the rhythm of life preparing to shift once more toward the next repeated task outside, where fuel will be collected, slowly, carefully, to keep the fire alive through the long winter night. When the meal has slipped quietly into the past, and a gentle, sufficient warmth spreads slowly through your body, the rhythm of life doesn't stop. It flows on into the next task, silent and familiar, like every winter day before it. You step outside onto ground that is hard and cold, where there are no trees, no dry branches to break, only wide open grassland that has long since fallen asleep. Here, fuel doesn't come from the forest, but from what the buffalo leave behind after their long migrations. Dried buffalo dung lies scattered light and brittle, almost blending into the colour of the earth. No one grimaces. No one hesitates. This isn't a last resort. It's the right choice for this place. You bend down and gather each piece by hand, movements slow and steady, repeating without thought. The cold numbs your fingertips, but the rhythm of collecting never changes. Each step forward, each bend, each rise feels the same, like a sequence the body learned long ago. Wind moves across the plain, carrying the dry scent of soil and grass. Not sharp, not unpleasant, simply the smell of winter prairie. You carry the fuel back toward the shelter, setting it down in small piles. No one counts, no one measures precisely, just enough. Enough for tonight, enough for a slow-burning fire. When the dried pieces are placed into the flames, they don't flare up. The fire only shifts slightly in colour, a deeper orange, then settles again. There's no crack, no sudden brightness, just a source of heat that is steady and patient. You realise this kind of fuel doesn't demand constant attention. It burns slowly, releasing warmth little by little, perfectly suited for a long night that has nowhere to rush. The smoke is lighter, less sharp, blending into the air, before drifting upward through the smoke hole as if it already knows its familiar path. Standing beside the fire, you don't feel like you've conquered the cold, only that you've found a way to live alongside it. This work repeats every day, and it's the repetition itself that brings a deep sense of acceptance. No one complains about the lack of trees. No one longs for a different kind of fuel. The prairie offers what it can, and people learn to use it with quiet calm. You notice that within this steady labour, the mind stops asking questions. Hands work, feet move, eyes see just enough. Time passes without leaving clear marks. When the fire is stable, when fuel is stacked neatly nearby, your body begins to slow. Tiredness doesn't arrive suddenly. It spreads gently, almost pleasant. This isn't exhaustion from strain, but the fatigue that comes from doing exactly what needed to be done. And it's that soft sense of completion that makes your eyelids heavier, your breath deeper, as if your body understands that tonight it can rest. When the task is finished, you return toward the shelter where the fire burns evenly and warmth is carefully held inside. The repeated motions of earlier still echo faintly in your body, forming a steady underlying rhythm. You know that after fuel, after fire, there are other ways to keep warm, soft, dry materials prepared long in advance, and this is when human hands shift from labour to touch, moving toward things lighter, gentler, continuing the quiet work of holding warmth through the long winter night. When the fire has settled into a steady burn, and the rhythm of labour outside has faded into the background, human hands move on to another task lighter, quieter, as if the hands themselves are ready to rest. You sit down near the fire where the warmth is just enough to keep your fingers from stiffening, and in front of you lie very simple materials, dried cattail fluff, bundles of thin, pale yellow grass. There is no strong scent, only the familiar dryness of grasses and plant fibres that have lived under sun and wind. When you touch the cattail fluff, the first sensation is its surprising lightness. It isn't cold or damp, but soft and loose like small clouds resting in your palm. The fibres separate easily without force, and when you press them gently they compress and then slowly expand again, trapping tiny pockets of air between them. That space is what holds warmth. You don't need to think about the principle, your hands understand it before your mind ever names it. You take small handfuls and gently tuck them into your footwear, into the places where cold usually finds its way in first. Dry grass rustles softly, a thin, even sound that lets you feel each movement of your hands. There is no rush. Each placement is an adjustment, just enough, not tight, not loose. As your hands slide into boots or thick layers of clothing, you notice a subtle change. The cold is blocked, not erased, but pushed farther away. The cattail fluff against your skin doesn't itch or scratch. It becomes a soft cushion that holds the warmth your body gives off. You do the same with outer layers, with the folds at wrists and ankles, the places where wind likes to slip through. The repeated motions, gentle, steady, mean you don't need to think. Each touch, each tuck, each smoothing of fibers into place brings a small sense of reassurance, like a quiet reminder that the body is being cared for. The sounds inside the teepee nearly disappear. There is only the faint brushing of dry grass against fabric, the fire breathing softly, and your own steady breath. Sensation in your fingertips becomes clearer than any thought. You can feel the difference between cattail fluff and dry grass, between softness and slight roughness, between fine fibers and firmer strands. No material is perfect. Each does its small part, and it is their combination that creates enough. When your hands finish their work, you rest them on your thighs and feel the new warmth slowly spreading, not intense but comfortably stable. Your mind no longer searches for information or anticipates what comes next. It simply follows sensation, drifting with the rhythm of touch, breath, and fire naturally. You realize that these materials carry no grand story. They don't need explanation. They only need to be touched. The ASMR of dry grass and cattail fluff doesn't come from loud sound, but from the subtlety of contact. Each strand settles into place as if long familiar with human hands. Each handful of fluff holds a bit of warmth, like a very small promise. When your body has been wrapped just enough, when the empty spaces have been gently filled, you no longer focus on the cold outside. It still exists, but it has been pushed farther away, no longer pressing against your skin. This sense of safety doesn't come from expensive things, but from simple knowledge of how to stay warm. And in that moment you can let go a little more, allowing your body to find its own rhythm of rest, as the story prepares to move forward away from hands and materials and toward a quiet survival philosophy as light as breath itself. When your body has been wrapped just enough, when the empty spaces have been filled with dry grass and cattail fluff, you no longer need to pay close attention to every small current of air. The cold is still there, out beyond the shelter, but it has been kept at a safe distance. In that state, a very simple idea begins to surface, not as a lesson to be memorized, but as something obvious that has long existed in this way of life. In places where winter is long and harsh, people do not try to create as much heat as possible. They learn to hold on to what they already have. Holding heat matters more than making heat. This idea is never spoken as a grand statement. It lives inside the small actions you have just taken, the way grass is tucked into boots, the way bodies sit closer together, the way the fire is kept low instead of flaring up and burning out quickly. No one argues about it. There is no right or wrong to defend. It is simply how things work, allowing people to pass calmly through a long night. You can feel this philosophy in your body rather than in your thoughts. When you keep your hands inside your sleeves a little longer, when you don't rush to stand up from a warm place, when you let your breath slow, instead of pulling in sharp air from the cold, you are practicing it. Creating heat requires effort, fuel, constant attention. Holding heat is different. It is gentler. It only asks for patience and an understanding of your own limits. People in the past did not try to defeat winter. They allowed winter to remain where it belonged and adjusted themselves to live alongside it. This idea does not need long explanations. It is repeated every day through small acts, so often that no one thinks of it as philosophy anymore. It is simply a way of living. You remember the low burning fire inside the teepee. If the flames rise too high, heat escapes quickly through the smoke hole and the cold returns sooner. But when the fire is kept low and steady, warmth stays longer, more evenly. This is a simple example repeated across generations. No one sets out to prove it. No one argues against it. People observe, feel, and continue doing the same. It is like wearing many thin layers instead of one thick one. Each layer holds a bit of warmth slowly and reliably. Holding heat is the accumulation of small things. It does not impress, but it never betrays. This philosophy extends into the way people live together. Sitting closer on a cold night is not about fear. It is simply the most natural way to stay warm. No invitation is needed. No major decision is made. Bodies move instinctively toward the presence of others. The most valuable warmth does not come from objects, but from presence. when you sit shoulder to shoulder, when another person's breathing becomes familiar beside you, heat is preserved without needing to be created anew. This is not sacrifice and it is not strategy, it is a reflex shaped patiently by time. You realize that this way of thinking does not demand deep analysis. It asks no questions that need answers. It gently suggests that sometimes doing less brings more. Creating heat is an active act, often tense. Holding heat is an act of listening. When you stop fighting the cold and begin to coexist with it, your body relaxes, your breathing deepens, your heartbeat slows, your mind no longer needs to stay alert. This is why this survival philosophy is never taught through long explanations. It is left for you to feel and absorb in a state very close to sleep. In modern life, you can turn on a heater, raise the temperature, and believe the problem is solved. But here, in this older world, people do not have that option. And because of that, they learn something we sometimes forget. Holding on to what you have is a skill just as important as creating something new. When you preserve warmth in the body, you also preserve calm in the mind. When the mind is no longer stimulated by constant effort, it drifts more easily toward rest. The philosophy of holding heat rather than making heat does not end with a clear conclusion. It simply settles like a fire, adjusted to just the right level, like your body now finding its most comfortable position. You don't need to carry this idea forward to think about it. Just let it remain there like a soft foundation for what comes next. And as the night continues, as the wind outside shifts direction once more, you will sense that the people in this story are not only keeping warm, but also knowing when it is time to leave, when it is time to move on, calmly and without. Struggle so that winter never becomes a burden too heavy to bear. After many days of living alongside the cold, you begin to notice something small yet unmistakably clear. The morning air no longer feels the same. The wind arrives earlier, stays longer, and carries a deeper dryness in every breath. No one says it out loud at first, but everyone feels it in their body. Winter is coming sooner than usual, not with violent snowstorms, but through subtle changes, the ground hardening, each morning breath turning white more quickly, daylight shortening, just enough for you to notice. This isn't a discovery that brings anxiety. It feels more like realizing that time has quietly moved forward naturally and without urgency. There is no meeting, no argument. People sit close together as they always do, listening to the wind outside and watching the fire burn low. Those who have lived through many winters understand that nature always speaks first, and it speaks softly. When you are used to listening, there is no need for dramatic reactions. The decision does not arrive as an order. It settles in as a quiet agreement forming slowly in the air. Everyone knows that staying too long would be unwise, and that leaving at the right moment is not failure, but part of the rhythm of life. Little Fox does not understand every reason, but he does not feel afraid. He watches the adults prepare inwardly, calmly, without haste or tension. His grandmother says little, only lingering longer beneath the sky in the late afternoon, as if confirming what she already knew. His parents exchange glances and short phrases, enough to understand. No one asks, "Should we go?" The only question is when, and the answer arrives gently soon but not yet. This shared decision carries no sense of loss. The teepee, the fire, the familiar space, none of it is left behind with regret. It has simply completed its role here. In this way of life, there is no fixed attachment to a single place. Attachment lives in the people who move together. When the community moves, warmth moves with it. That thought spreads slowly, steady enough to bring reassurance. Leaving is not a farewell, it is continuation. You begin to see that this calm comes from not trying to control weather or seasons. People adjust themselves to the rhythm of earth and sky. When winter arrives early, there is no blame, no resistance, only movement. That flexibility keeps migration from becoming a mental burden. It feels as natural as shifting your position after sitting too long or pulling a blanket higher when the air turns cold. A deeply human reflex. Once the decision has been accepted, the atmosphere grows quieter. No one rushes to pack immediately. Everything continues at the same pace. Only now, each action carries a silent preparation within it. You can feel this transition in your own body, not fully relaxed as before, yet not tense either. A gentle, in-between state, stable and calm. This is how people enter change without waking fear. And as night settles in, as the fire burns evenly like every other evening, you know that tomorrow or the day after familiar tasks will take on a new meaning, unfastening, folding, bundling, not to end something, but to prepare for another slow journey across the winter grasslands. Once the decision has settled into the community as something natural and unquestioned, morning arrives without any sense of urgency. The air is still cold, the wind still moves gently across the grasslands, but within that familiar space your body begins doing what it has done many times before. Taking down the teepee is not an ending, it is simply another part of the rhythm of living. You step closer, placing your hands on the hide that has sheltered everyone through long nights. The familiar texture spreads into your fingertips. There is no longing, no hesitation, only a soft, steady focus. The poles are removed one by one, not fast, not slow. Each lift mirrors the last. You lay them down on the ground, straight and parallel. The hide covering is lowered carefully, never letting the wind pull at it too hard. When it touches the earth, there is a quiet sound low, soft like a sigh from something that has completed its work. You begin to fold the hide edge to edge, smoothing it gently so the layers rest neatly together. Your hands move almost on their own. There is no need to think about what comes next. The body remembers. Around you, others are doing the same. No one speaks much. There is only the sound of hide brushing against hide, rope sliding through hands, footsteps moving back and forth in an even pattern. This work requires no discussion. Everyone knows their place in the shared sequence. When a hide is fully folded, it is set aside waiting to be tied. Rope is wrapped around each bundle, not too tight, not too loose. You pull, feeling just enough tension in your hands, then tie a familiar knot. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It only needs to hold for the journey ahead. Time passes without marking itself. No moment stands out from the next. Everything blends into a steady flow, fold, tie, set down. Lift, carry, stack. This rhythm does not stimulate thought. Instead, it lightens the mind, like listening to a repeated sound for a long while. Your breathing slows naturally. Your shoulders and back remain relaxed, working within motions they know well. This is not labor aimed at achievement, but labor meant to maintain order. Little Fox joins in doing small tasks suited to his strength, carrying light items, placing them where they belong, repeating the same motions again and again. No one rushes him, no one corrects him sharply. This work does not demand perfection, it only asks for steadiness. And in that steadiness, you see something very old. When labor is unforced, it becomes part of life itself, not a burden. The body does not grow heavy with fatigue, only gently tired in a way that feels almost comforting. When everything has been folded and secured, the ground where the teepee once stood feels more open, but the emptiness brings no sense of loss. It feels more like a pause, a breath. The space is returned to wind and grass, while people carry forward what they need. You stand still for a moment, noticing the subtle change in the air. The familiar scent of smoke is gone, but warmth remains inside you. Preparation slowly comes to an end. Bundles are stacked neatly, ready for the path ahead. Your body now rests in a very particular state, active enough to feel lightly tired, steady enough that the mind no longer follows details. This is the state where sleep comes most easily. And as you look out across the open grasslands toward the route where movement will soon begin, you know that everything is ready for a long, unhurried journey, one marked by even footsteps stretching quietly through the winter landscape. When everything has been folded and tied, morning arrives gently, without the feeling of a fresh beginning or any trace of excitement. You simply rise, pull on the familiar layers of clothing, and step out onto the wide grasslands. Ahead of you, the travois are already prepared. 2 long wooden poles crossed and bound with coarse rope, their trailing ends dragging along the ground. They are not designed for speed. They are made for steadiness. The dogs stand at the front, the pulling lines held at just the right tension, not jerking, not slack. They have known this work for a long time, so no commands are needed. When the group begins to move, the travois glides softly over the dry grass, creating a low, even sound, like a continuous background rhythm. You walk with the others. No one moves faster than anyone else. Each footstep on the hard ground mirrors the one before it. There is no need to dodge obstacles or choose complicated paths. The grassland opens wide enough for the group to move in a long, unbroken line. The wind moves sideways across the plain, carrying dry, cold, but never harshly. You lift your collar slightly and keep walking. Your body is not tense. It knows this pace. Walking here is not about reaching a destination, but about maintaining movement enough to stay warm enough to stay gently awake. You don't look far ahead. Your gaze naturally lowers, following the ground just in front of your feet where grass bends and slowly springs back after each step. The landscape passes without sudden change. Grassland follows grassland. The sky feels wide and low, its colours shifting only slightly from one hour to the next. Now and then a thin patch of snow appears in a shallow dip, then fades away as you move past it. These details do not linger in memory. They come and go like breath. When the group pauses to rest, there is no heavy panting, only a natural stop. The travois are set down. The dogs lie on the ground and curl in. People stand or sit quietly. No one rushes. Rest is not for recovering from great exhaustion, but for keeping the rhythm unbroken, smooth and continuous. Little Fox stays close to his family. His steps are shorter but never hurried. When he tires, he stops, breathes, then continues. No one urges him forward. Here, keeping up matters less than staying in rhythm. You feel a calm acceptance in the way everyone honours the body's natural pace. No one pushes ahead. No one falls too far behind. This evenness makes the group feel like a single living being, moving slowly through the winter space. After walking long enough, your sense of time begins to blur. You can no longer tell how much has passed since the last rest. Your body only knows the pattern. Walk, pause, walk again. The sounds of the journey are sparse, and that is what makes them soothing. The soft scrape of the travois, footsteps meeting the earth, wind moving somewhere far away. There is no extended conversation. A few short words when needed, then silence returns. This silence is not empty. It is filled with repeating background sounds, enough to keep the mind from creating new thoughts. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from sudden drowsiness, but because there is no reason to hold them wide open. The steady motion has done its work. As the group continues forward, the light shifts very slowly. There is no clear moment when day changes. The sky fades lighter, then darker, then light again, colours drifting without pause. You do not need to remember how far you have travelled. That no longer matters. What matters is that your body stays warm, your breathing stays even, and the community remains close. The travois keeps sliding, the dogs keep pulling, the people keep walking. The motion repeats so steadily that you could close your eyes and still feel it happening. When a longer rest finally comes, you sit down and lean gently against a bundled load. The wind passes, but you no longer react strongly. Your body has adapted to the cold and to the rhythm of movement. In this state, your awareness drifts far. You do not think about the destination. You do not think about the distance ahead. You remain in the present moment, where everything moves slowly, evenly, and safely. This is when sleep often comes most easily, even while the journey continues. And when the group rises again, when the travois begin once more to slide across the grass, you know this movement will continue for some time. Yet somewhere within that steadiness, some bodies will grow weaker, some breaths will slow more than usual, not because of danger, but because a long winter always carries quiet farewells. And it is that quiet arriving as gently as the wind that will become the next part of the story. After many days of steady movement, within that repeated rhythm of walking and resting, you begin to notice that not every body can keep the same pace. Some footsteps grow a little slower. Some pauses last slightly longer than before. The elders in the group do not speak much. They do not complain, and they do not ask for special attention. Their bodies have already passed through many winters, and the tiredness arrives not like a sudden wave, but like a thin layer of mist, slowly settling over each movement. You see it in the way they sit longer during rests, in their shorter breaths, in the way their eyes close earlier at the end of the day. Illness does not arrive abruptly. It comes slowly, very slowly, like cold seeping through thick clothing. No one names it. No diagnosis is needed. The community is used to listening to the smallest signals of the body. As the elder weakens, they are guided closer to family, shielded more carefully from the wind, given the warmest place when the group stops. There is no panic, no desperate attempt to stretch life at all costs. Only steady, gentle care enough so that the person does not feel alone. When death comes, it does not force the group to stop suddenly. It arrives during a rest when the wind is light and the daylight has begun to fade. The elder simply does not wake again. The breath ends softly like a rhythm that has completed itself. There is no cry, no shocking moment. Those nearby sense it instinctively even before they reach out to touch. They sit still for a while, unhurried, allowing silence to do what it needs to do. This passing is not seen as failure. It is understood as the natural ending of a long journey. There is no dramatized grief, no outward collapse. Any sadness that exists rests deep and quiet. Hands are placed on shoulders. People sit a little closer together, sharing warmth without words. For little Fox, the moment is not as frightening as he once imagined. The adults do not panic. They simply remain together as they have throughout the journey. Death does not break the community. It reminds the community that each person is part of something larger than themselves. The one who has passed is tended to with simple respect. No elaborate ceremony, no long speeches, only familiar, careful movements, slow and steady, like every other task in this life. The body is laid upon the cold earth that sustained them through their years. Winter is not blamed. Time is not cursed. Everything is accepted as it is. You begin to understand that this acceptance is what keeps the community from breaking apart. By not resisting what cannot be changed, people preserve the calm they need to continue living. Afterward, the group rises again, not immediately, but not after too long either. The movement resumes slow and even just as before. There is a small gap now in the line, but the rhythm remains unchanged. Loss does not make the steps heavier. It only makes the silence deeper. And within that silence you feel something very clear. Winter is not only a test of the body, but also a test of acceptance. As the light shifts once more and the wind softens, you sense that the group is drawing closer to another place, a quieter valley, more sheltered, where the wind is gentler and the water does not freeze as deeply. The death that has just occurred does not pull everyone downward. It simply makes the need for safety ahead more real. And from that deep quiet, the story begins to move toward a different feeling. The feeling of being held and protected as the community approaches a place where it will finally rest through the long winter still to come. After many long, steady days of movement, the grassland ahead of you begins to dip gently downward. It is not a dramatic change, but a subtle shift, felt first in the body. The wind no longer strikes your face directly, and your steps no longer have to push against the cold head-on. A valley opens slowly like a wide bowl, holding the group without needing to announce itself. No one stops right away. No one ever does. You simply keep walking a few more steps, then a few more, letting the body confirm what it already senses. This place is different. Here the wind slides higher above head level, curling along the lower slopes, leaving a thin pocket of calm at the center. That calm is not loud or obvious. It is just enough for you to notice that you can breathe a little deeper. Water makes itself known before you see it. You hear it first, a small, steady sound, unhurried. When you draw closer, it is a narrow stream, not fast, not wide, but not frozen solid. The surface is dark, moving slowly beneath the cold. The presence of water changes the weight of the space. It tells the body that staying warm will be easier here, that the next tasks can unfold without urgency. No one cheers, no one points. The community simply adjusts where it stands naturally, turning toward the lower ground where the wind does not strike directly. You realize that safety does not require verbal confirmation. It is felt first through skin and lungs. The light in the valley is softer. The sky remains wide, yet it feels lower, as if shaped by the gentle curves of the land. Footprints show more clearly in the firm grass, not erased immediately by the wind. The sound of the group shifts as well, quieter, closer. When everyone stops, they do not spread out. The distance between bodies narrows slightly, not out of fear, but because it makes sense. Little Fox slows, then stands still. He does not ask questions. He feels what the adults feel. This place allows stopping. That is enough. Safety does not arrive like a wave. It arrives like a slight tilt, barely noticeable, when you place your weight down and feel the ground support you. The wind still exists, but it is no longer the main presence. It passes above, leaving enough calm for a fire to later burn steadily. You look around and see natural signs that are simply right: a low bank breaking the wind, water nearby, ground level enough to work with. No map is needed, no long discussion. These signs have been read across many seasons, so often that the body recognizes them before the mind does. When the decision to stop settles in, nothing changes abruptly. There is no burst of relief. The rhythm of walking simply fades very gently, and the rhythm of standing begins. Bundles are set down carefully, not dropped. Dogs lie beside the travois, curling in on themselves. Everything finds its place the way water finds a low point. You feel your shoulders drop slightly, your jaw loosen. This is not the end of the journey, but the right place for winter. That sense of rightness allows the body to stop anticipating and begin resting. In the valley, sound carries less. Voices, when needed, do not travel far before dissolving. The smells of earth and water blend soft and unsharp. You realize that it is this simplicity that creates safety. Nothing demands quick reactions. When you stand still, the wind does not jerk at you. When you sit, the ground does not bite with cold. Everything feels just enough, and just enough becomes the key for the night ahead. No one gives this place a grand name. It is simply the winter camp, a temporary home, but long enough for the body to establish a new rhythm. There is no celebration for arriving, only small confirmations through action, setting bundles with the wind in mind, choosing where the fire will be, leaving space for the teepees to rise again. You sense that safety is not about having many things, but about being in the right place, right for the wind to pass over, right for water to be near, right for people to stay together. As the light thins, the valley holds darkness evenly. There are no sudden deep shadows. Your eyes do not have to adjust much. Your breathing lengthens. The gentle fatigue from the journey blends with reassurance, creating a steady foundation for what comes next. Tasks that do not require thought, only hands moving in familiar ways. And as you look around and see people beginning to mark out positions, you know this quiet safety will soon be reinforced by motions long known. Raising the teepees again, setting earth, keeping the fire, steady acts that will restore order, slowly and softly preparing the first winter night in this new camp. Once the valley has been accepted by the body, even before the mind, the next tasks unfold naturally. No one signals a beginning, yet everyone moves toward familiar positions as if the ground itself has already pointed the way. The poles are raised one by one, no rush, no hesitation. You steady each pole, feel the faint cold at your fingertips, then set its base where the wind touches least. When it stands firm, you step back half a pace, check its balance, and move on to the next. Raising a teepee is not about proving strength, it is about finding equilibrium. Every movement aims for long-term stability, not speed, not excess. The hide covering is drawn up slowly, settling around the frame like a garment worn many times before. You smooth the folds, pull it taut just enough, then secure it with familiar knots. Simple, not decorative, but reliable. When the wind brushes past, the hide trembles softly, almost like a nod of agreement. There is no loud noise, only low, steady sounds, rope against hide, footsteps on firm ground, breathing moving together. Order takes shape without words through things standing exactly where they should. Once the frame is secure, the work shifts to reinforcement. Earth is scooped up in small amounts and packed around the base to block drifting air. Snow, when there is any, is layered on top and pressed gently, never forced. You feel the difference as soon as a full circle is complete. The wind quiets outside, sounds fall slightly farther away. The body understands that warmth will linger longer now. No one says that's enough, yet everyone knows when to stop, when the structure feels right, neither heavy nor thin. Inside, the fire is built low again. No flare, no crack, just fuel placed with care, so the flame burns evenly and lasts. You watch the color, a deep, steady orange. Smoke finds its way up through the smoke hole without resistance. When smoke moves smoothly, the fire stays calm. When the fire stays calm, the air does too. Everything links together in a simple chain that is easy to trust, and that predictability settles the mind. The community works like a single body. No one does more than their part. No one stands idle for long. Small tasks connect and repeat. Little Fox carries lighter items, sets them where they belong, returns and repeats. He learns order not through instruction but through rhythm, the rhythm of raising, sealing, tending the fire. It is slow, even, and deeply familiar. As time passes, movements soften, shoulders drop, the neck loosens. Fatigue arrives gently without weight. When the teepee stands firm, the gaps sealed with earth and snow, and the fire burning steady, the space inside changes. Not much warmer, but clearly more stable. This stability does not require constant checking. You sit and feel warmth spread slowly and evenly. There is nothing urgent left to fix. Whatever remains can wait. Order has returned enough for the first night in the new camp to pass quietly. You realize that order does not come from doing many things, but from doing the necessary ones well. When everything settles into place, the mind stops searching for backup plans. Breathing lengthens. The heart eases. Safety needs no confirmation. It is there like solid ground beneath your feet. In this moment, winter is no longer a direct challenge. It becomes the backdrop slightly farther away against which life continues. Night lowers itself into the valley evenly. Darkness does not arrive all at once. It comes with the low firelight and with movements slowing down. You look around and see people finding their familiar places inside the teepee, sitting a little closer together. No one talks about tomorrow. No one revisits the journey. Everyone understands that once order is restored, the best thing to do is repeat the small, steady routines that allow bodies and time to fall back into sync. And from that stability, with the shelter standing and the fire settled into its rhythm, you know the days ahead will not be marked by events, but by cycles, waking, small work, rest, modest meals, early sleep, slow, gentle circles that carry the story forward into a place where repetition itself becomes winter's deepest lullaby. Once the shelter stands firm, and the fire has settled into a steady rhythm, the days in the winter camp begin to pass in a way that is difficult to distinguish. Morning arrives without a clear signal. You wake not because of strong light, but because your body has rested enough. The fire from the night before is reduced to glowing embers, just enough to revive without hurry. You sit up, pull on the familiar layers, and sense that the air inside the teepee still holds a gentle, workable warmth. Nothing new demands attention. And it is precisely this familiarity that makes the morning require no beginning. The day's work is never listed, it simply appears when needed. Someone steps outside to read the wind. Someone brings water back. Someone shifts seating closer to the fire. You do your part, neither large nor small, and there is no reason to do it quickly. Each motion mirrors yesterday's, and will mirror tomorrow's. When your hands touch familiar materials, the body already knows what to do. Time moves through chains of action like this, repeating even without emphasis. No one asks which day it is. There is no concept of weekdays or weekends. Days are measured by the fire's heat, by how much water remains, by the strength of the wind outside. When the wind grows stronger, people stay nearer the fire. When it softens, someone may step outside a little longer. These adjustments happen naturally, without discussion. You begin to notice that when time is no longer divided by clocks or calendars, it becomes softer. You do not need to hold on to it. You simply exist within it. Meals come and go without marking the day. The food remains simple, sufficient, largely unchanged. Eating in silence has become habitual, needing no reminder. After eating, no one rises immediately. They remain seated a while longer, letting warmth spread slowly through the body. Long silences appear more often now, but they are not heavy. They feel like natural pauses between breaths. You feel no need to fill them with words. Day and night lose their sharp boundary. Light outside changes, but not enough to pull you out of the rhythm inside the shelter. When darkness arrives, the fire is kept lower. When daylight returns, the fire still burns, only slightly different. You do not need to look outside to know the time. Your body adjusts on its own, guided by temperature and dim light. Your eyelids grow heavy at moments that are hard to predict, not when it is darkest, but when everything has become familiar enough. Little Fox lives inside this repetition as naturally as a fish in water. He does not ask when winter will end. He does small tasks around the shelter, sits close to the adults, then sleeps. Each day resembles the last, so closely that he cannot tell yesterday from today. Yet there is no loss in that. The repetition makes him feel safe. There are no surprises, no new demands. The world has narrowed to a size the body can understand without effort. For you, this rhythm slowly blurs the line between listening to a story and living inside it. You no longer track where the story is going. You do not need to remember what came before. Each moment of daily life resembles the previous one, changing only slightly in light wind or where you sit. These differences are too small to wake the mind. They are just enough to keep the body comfortable. Days pass this way, neither fast nor slow. When you try to remember how long it has been since the camp was raised, the answer slips away. But that uncertainty brings no concern. Instead, it feels like relief. When memory is no longer used to mark time, it naturally quiets. That quiet spreads through the body. Your shoulders loosen. Your breath deepens. The mind creates fewer images. At night, everyone sleeps a little earlier, not from exhaustion, but because there is no reason to stay awake. The fire burns low and steady, needing no watch. The wind outside becomes familiar background sound no longer noticed. You lie down, curl inward, and feel the insulating layers doing exactly what they are meant to do. Sleep arrives not as an event, but as a continuation of a day that has already been long enough. And the next day, if it can still be called that, unfolds the same way. It is this sameness that deepens sleep. When the mind stops tracking progress and waiting for change, it allows itself to fully let go. The story does not need an ending. It is slowly softening, giving way to a sustained sense of safety. And within this repeated rhythm, you begin to understand that not every story needs a climax or conclusion. Some stories exist simply to stay with you until you no longer need to listen. As the fire dims, as the breathing of those around you blends into silence, you drift toward the final stretch, not a clear ending, but a quiet state where story and sleep meet as gently as embers still warm in a winter night. As the days pass without needing names, you slowly lose track of when evening truly begins. The light inside the shelter has settled to its lowest necessary level, and the fire at the center burns very small. Now not flaring, not shifting, just a warm pocket of glow, enough for faces to appear soft and indistinct, then fade back into shadow. You sit a little closer, not because of cold, but because this distance feels right. Outside, the wind still moves, but it has become a familiar sound, like the breath of the earth passing through and moving on. The family gathers around the fire without arrangement. No one chooses a seat. No one yields one. Each person finds their place by feel, leaning lightly against another. Warmth comes less from the small flame than from the bodies nearby. You sense the breathing of the person beside you, slow, steady, needing no words. There is no conversation to finish, no story waiting to be told. Presence is enough. Beyond the shelter, the wind slides along the hide walls, creating low, even sounds, never sharp. Each time it passes, the shelter trembles faintly, then settles again. You no longer react to these movements. Your body has learned the boundary inside is warmth and community. Outside is winter doing its own work. There is no struggle between the two. They simply coexist, each in its proper place. Little Fox has fallen asleep without you noticing. He is curled in tightly, his breathing light and even. The adults do not watch him for long, just long enough to know that all is well. Eyes close earlier now. No one tries to stay awake. The fire needs no tending. The wind needs no listening. Everything has entered the rhythm of night. Your eyelids grow heavy, not from fatigue, but because there is nothing left that requires attention. Time no longer feels like a current. It feels more like still water without ripples. You do not think about tomorrow, and you do not return to the days that have passed. The story is not moving forward, and it is not closing behind you. It simply exists here in this quiet moment. Everything that needed to be learned has already been absorbed by the body. How to keep warmth, how to stay together, how to let winter pass without resistance. The fire shrinks, further shifting from light into heat. Light is no longer needed. Heat remains quietly. You adjust your position just slightly, find the place that feels most comfortable, and stop. There is nothing more to change. Your breathing lengthens, deepens, then settles back into an even rhythm. In this state, you are no longer listening to a story. You are inside it, and the story is no longer trying to keep you awake. The wind continues outside. The family remains gathered. The fire keeps its small, steady burn. There is no farewell, no final line, only the slow continuation of a winter night, long enough that you no longer need to follow it. And as you allow your eyes to close, the story does not end. It simply moves farther away, quietly, gently, so you can drift into sleep, as if you have belonged to this calm rhythm for a very long time already. From the story How Native Americans Survived -40 Winters with Zero Firewood, the greatest message does not lie in extraordinary survival skills, but in the way people slowed their lives to move in harmony with nature rather than trying to defeat it. The people of the past did not seek to generate endless heat, endless resources, or complex solutions. Instead, they learned how to preserve what already existed, to hold warmth, to maintain rhythm, to protect community, and to remain calm in the face of what could not be changed. In modern life, we often respond to hardship by doing more, thinking more, and becoming more tense. Yet this story reminds us that sometimes living well is not about speeding up, but about slowing down. Preserving energy matters more than burning it. Staying close to people who make us feel safe matters more than chasing sources of anxiety. And accepting reality, even when it is harsh, is far gentler than fighting against it every single day. The Native Americans in this story teach us a simple truth. The most precious warmth does not come from material things, but from people and connection. When a community stays close, when life moves at a steady pace, when we allow ourselves to rest at the right time, even the harshest winter can pass in peace. Before drifting into sleep, I hope you can carry this sense of calm with you, a gentle reminder that you do not need to be strong all the time, only slow enough and close enough to what feels safe. Thank you for staying and listening to the story until the end. If these gentle historical sleep stories bring you relaxation and comfort, please like the video, share it with those you care about, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue these slow, warm, and peaceful journeys through history together each night.